2024 is coming to an end, and it was a really good year for movies. But not all movies are created equally. What did I think of everything I watched this year? Let's check it out. Night Swim was one of the first movies released last year, and unfortunately, it did not start the year off with a bang. I went into this movie with pretty low expectations, and honestly, it kind of went below what I was expecting. I think that there's a lot better, like, haunted house movies that you could watch instead of Night Swim, and honestly, just everything about this movie was sort of underwhelming, and it kind of committed the cardinal sin that any movie could commit, and that is being boring. I thought the cast was fine, the story was just whatever, but I think if there's one good thing I could give this movie is that every now and then this movie actually looked pretty decent. Like, it does have pretty decent cinematography, and so because of that, I'm going to give Night Swim a 2 out of 10. I saw Madam Web 3 times this year, twice in theaters, and it's one of my, guilty pleasures of the year. It's one of those movies that is so bad, it's good. This movie makes so many strange decisions and just is a very confusing mess of a movie that does these characters such a disservice. If you want to see my full thoughts, you can check out me and Joey's review in the description below. I gave this movie a 2 out of 10, and nothing's changed. I'm gonna be honest, I am not the biggest fan of the Terrifier movies. I don't really like the first one all that much, and the second one I thought was actually an improvement, not really by much, but I did like the inclusion of Sienna as the main character. I think that that's the best thing that this franchise could have done, and I was actually really excited to see if Terrifier 3 was one of those cases where the movies just sort of get progressively better. Unfortunately, though, I think Terrifier 3 is sort of a regression. I think that the story in this is weaker than the second. I think that the character work is weaker than the second, and it's sort of just goes back to being focused more on the kills than on the actual story. To some people, they're here for just the kills, but for me, I kind of want a little bit more out of my slasher movies. I gave Terrifier 3 a 2.5 out of 10. Say what you want about M. Night's latest films, I love them so much, because you really never know what you're gonna get, and his latest movie, Trap, is another one of those instances. This is sort of like Madam Web, where it is so bad that it's good. I really had a great time watching Trap. I think that this movie tries to do a lot and just doesn't do a very good job of it. The performances are also something that was a big problem for me. I don't think anybody in this movie was doing particularly well, but that sort of adds to the aspect of it being so bad it's good. I had a great time watching it, and I would recommend it for the same reason I would recommend Madam Web. It's just watch it with friends, have a drink, it's a good time. I gave Trap a 3 out of 10. Continuing the trend of movies that are so bad they're good, I have Red 1. This is the latest movie from The Rock, and the way that he was talking about this movie going into it was just crazy. I would describe Red 1 as a sauceless MCU movie. This is a movie that is convinced that it is the next big thing, but unfortunately it just wasn't. I don't think The Rock and Chris Evans really had enough sauce to carry this movie, but it's one of those instances where it's just a good time. I had a really fun time watching the movie, but sort of in that sense of oh, okay, I don't know how we got here, but I'm enjoying it. I gave Red 1 a 3 out of 10. It pains me to put this movie this low, but unfortunately The Crow is our next movie up. You can check out my full review of the movie in the description. To put it simply, I think Bill Skarsgård is a good Crow that is just given bad material. I think that when he is the Crow, he really shines. I don't think the romance aspect of the movie worked at all, which sucks, because I think in any good Crow story revolving around Eric, I think that that's the most important thing that you should nail down. This movie takes so long to get to the point that by the end of the movie, you're like, oh my god, he's the Crow, and then it's over. I was really disappointed, and it kind of sucks to put the movie this low, but I gave The Crow 2024 a 3 out of 10. Joker, Folie à Deux, it's the only time I'm going to call it that, is not a very good sequel to the first Joker movie. The first Joker movie is one that I loved when I was in high school. It was one of my favorites, but over time, I've really, kind of gone cold on that movie. I think it's good. I think it's just, a fine comic book movie, but Joker 2 just sort of is like, what are we doing here? I think if there's one way to describe this movie, it's that Todd Phillips seems a little embarrassed to be making a comic book movie at points, which sucks because I love these characters, and I think that if you are going to be making a comic book movie musical, I think that Joker and Harley are great candidates. They're one of the best options you could pick. I think a combination of just going back to the first movie and hand feeding to the audience that you should not like the Joker, that he's a bad guy, and just really poorly added in musical elements really brought this movie down for me. I think that Joker and Harley really deserve like a really good movie because I think there's so much to do with those two. I think there's so much reiteration that needs to be done with their relationship. Joker 2 just was not it. I gave this movie a 3.5 out of 10. This movie has a review on the channel. You can check it out in the description. It is Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. Over time, I just found myself not really enjoying the movie as much as I did initially. Granted, it was a great time watching it with Joey and just seeing what was happening. This is along the lines of like Red One and Madam Web, where it's so bad it's good. But this is on like the lower spectrum of that. Like, I don't think I'm gonna revisit Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire that much. I'm actually going to give this a lower score of a 5 out of 10. It's a lower score than was in the video. I think the placement of this movie is going to shock some people, but I'm going to put Civil War down here. I was really underwhelmed with this movie. I wanted to like it a lot more than I did. And initially I thought, okay, this is a really interesting premise. We have the focus on the war photographers, but I think that this movie just doesn't really say much. There's not really any substance to what is being presented, and I think that that was my biggest issue. It has like sort of all the building blocks to be this really nuanced presentation of morality and sort of a society as a whole, but I just don't think that there was really much that wasn't explicitly just like told to the audience. That's my least favorite way of presenting like themes and all that. I was just really underwhelmed. I think it looks really good. I think the performances are great, but it's just really held back by, in my opinion, just a really lackluster script. And because of that, I'm gonna give Civil War a 6 out of 10. Believe it or not, Bad Boys Ride or Die was my entry into the Bad Boys series. I watched the first Bad Boys after watching Ride or Die and didn't watch any of the others this year. I plan on watching the rest of them, but I thought that this movie was just really fun. I mean, there's not much to it. Martin Lawrence and Will Smith have the sauce. They still got it. I think Martin Lawrence is really the standout in this movie, but there's not much for me to say. It's just fun. I think if you're looking for a mindless action movie, this is like a contender, but it's one that I think you'll forget about. Like, I kind of have forgotten what happened in the movie. I gave this a 6 out of 10. In a Violent Nature was a movie that I was very excited for, and I think it lived up to some of the expectations. I think that when this movie was the premise that it promised, I really liked it a lot, like when it was just following the killer and it was just solely from the killer's perspective. I know a lot of people made fun of it for being like a walking simulator movie, but I think it was something fresh that I think this slasher genre has sort of needed for a while. Unfortunately, I think that that only applies to like the first half of the movie. Once the ball gets rolling and the killer gets like all his tools and all that, it sort of just becomes like a Friday the 13th light movie. Like, it's fine. I think the kills are really gnarly, but I think that I liked it more when it wasn't just a slasher movie. I liked it more when it was about the killer and you're seeing like his process of how he's getting from place to place, how he's getting all of his weapons, his mask, and all that stuff. I would really like to see another movie sort of attempt this sort of deal. I think that In a Violent Nature scratched the Friday the 13th itch that has been there for a while with all the legal problems, but I'm gonna give In a Violent Nature a 6.5 out of 10. You can check out this review on the channel. Beetlejuice is next up on the list. I think that this is a movie that over time I've soured on a little bit, but I don't think my score has changed. I think everyone in the movie is really good, but it's just the story isn't there for me, especially considering the first Beetlejuice is like a classic staple like Halloween movie. I think that I'm not gonna visit this movie at all. I think I'll just watch the first one, stick to that one. I gave Beetlejuice a score of a 6 out of 10, and nothing has changed. Inside Out 2 is a really solid sequel. I have a couple qualms with the way that they approached it. I think that they introduced a lot of cool emotions, but we just didn't get to see any of them in action except for anxiety. The story for this one was a bit of a downgrade from the first one. I think the first one was a lot better because it had more to do personally with Riley. I think that this one I just don't think was as solid of a premise this time around, but I did still find it like, okay, yeah, it's a sequel, it's fine. You know, it's not something that really reinvents the wheel. I think visually Inside Out looked great the first time. It looks even better the second time. I'm interested to see if they do another Inside Out movie. I don't think they have to. They probably will. And I'm seated. This didn't turn me off of the series at all. It's just a fine sequel. I think the first one is definitely better. I gave Inside Out 2 a score of a 7 out of 10. Abigail is the latest film from Radio Silence, and in my opinion is the lesser of their work. I like all of their stuff though, so that's not really a bad thing. Ready or Not, Scream 5, Scream 6, and Abigail I think are all pretty solid horror movies. This is one that I think is good, but it's not one that I would revisit as much as something like Ready or Not or Scream 6. It's got really good action and a really good ensemble cast. I think that that's what Radio Silence sort of excels at, is bringing together all of these actors and just delivering a really fun horror movie. I think that Abigail is just a fun time. I would recommend it if you're looking for like an action horror film. I gave this a score of a 7 out of 10. I think this movie being this low might make some people upset, but Wicked is going to come up next. I was actually very impressed with the way that this movie looked and the performances in the movie. Ariana Grande was honestly a surprise. I thought she was great as Glinda. Cynthia Erivo, a great actress, she does amazing as Elphaba. Other than those two, I really don't have any notes about any of the actors because I think that this movie kind of forgets about its supporting cast. They come in, they have a really cool musical number or scene, and then they're kind of just gone for the rest of the movie. Granted, I think that this is something that the sequel will address. I'm not familiar with the Wicked material, so I don't know, but I'm really hoping that that is the case. I thought all of the music in this movie was really good. It's not something I'll listen to like on the road or anything, but it was good. I thought the musical numbers themselves were good. Like I said, I think the performances from the two leads was good, but I just left kind of underwhelmed, especially considering that a lot of people were really hyping this up. But I thought it was still pretty good. It gets a passing score of a 7 out of 10. This next movie also has a review on the channel, you can check it out in the description, and that is Roadhouse. I have really good memories with this movie. Me and Joey watched the first with his family, and then we got up really early in the morning to watch this when it came out. This is a movie that over time, its flaws definitely start to show. Like, I don't think it's as good as the original Roadhouse, story-wise, and then Conor McGregor's kind of doing whatever he wants, and that's a really interesting experience. It's a fun movie. I think that this is one that you'll have a good time with watching with friends. It gets a lowered score by just a little bit of a 7 out of 10. I didn't know anything about Blink Twice going into it, but I left pretty impressed. I did not know that Zoe Kravitz was making a movie at all. I didn't know that this movie was coming out, and I sort of just watched this randomly on a whim, and I'm glad I did. It is a really thrilling movie. I thought that the cast in this was amazing. Channing Tatum is great as a male manipulator, and I don't know if that's coming from a legitimate place or if he's just a really good actor, and I'm inclined to believe the latter. Blink Twice is just a really solid movie. I think that it was a nice surprise. This is one of the biggest surprises of the year, for sure. I was impressed with Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut, though I will admit I think the ending was a little rushed and undercooked. I'm intrigued to see what she does in the future. This was a pretty good directorial debut. You can check out my review for this movie on the channel, but next up is going to be Deadpool and Wolverine. I still stand by it. This is my favorite of the Deadpool trilogy. It being a tribute to the Fox X-Men movies is really cool. Seeing Hugh Jackman back is dope, and he honestly makes for just a really good foil for Deadpool to bounce off of. Like, they're acting off each other, and I think that that's what really makes the movie for me. It's not one of the best Marvel movies ever made or anything, but it's one that I just, like I said, had a really good time watching. I gave Deadpool and Wolverine a score of a 7.5 out of 10. My Old Ass. Great title. I really liked Megan Park's last movie, The Fallout, with Jenna Ortega, which is about the fallout of a really traumatic event that I don't think that I can mention by name here, but it's really good. I would highly recommend checking it out. I was interested to see this movie because I was really interested in the idea of seeing a younger self and an older self meet, seeing that sense of, okay, this is who I am in the future, this is who I am now, how are we different, how are we alike? But we really don't get much of that outside of like one scene. I thought that this movie, when it was that, was really cool, and then when it was a coming of age story, was fine. My biggest issue with the way that the romance was handled is sort of the idea that this movie feels like a straight awakening movie, if that makes sense, which I think is sort of like a weird stance to take. I think that it was fine, but it's not really anything like super special. That being said, I think it looks great. I think the acting is great. I think Aubrey Plaza is a standout when she's in the movie, but I would still recommend checking this one out if you like those type of movies. I gave this a score of a 7.5 out of 10. There's a full review of this movie on the channel already, but next up is going to be Monkey Man. This is a movie that I was pretty cold to when it originally came out, but sort of over time, I think I'm gonna have to revisit it because I sort of like some of the concepts that I didn't really enjoy that much. So I mean, I don't know, my score might change. The action is great, Dev Patel is great as the lead, and I really just want to see if I like the movie more on second viewing. I give this a score of a 7.5 out of 10. The Fall Guy is just a really fun time. If you liked Bullet Train, I think you'll like The Fall Guy. This is that same exact type of movie. It's from the same director. Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt have amazing chemistry in this movie, and they're honestly my favorite part of the movie. And then the supporting cast is great too. Aaron Taylor Johnson plays a douchebag. Really good. Nice job, Aaron. I just really love these kinds of movies where it's just balls to the wall action and has a really just nice story. I give The Fall Guy an 8 out of 10. I'm a sucker for just a really good horror comedy, and that is exactly what Lisa Frankenstein is. Cole Sprouse and Katherine Newton are really good as the leads in this movie, and considering that this is, I think, Zelda Williams' first movie, she does really good. I am really excited to see what else she does. This was just a really solid movie. I really liked the dark comedy that was in this movie. It's just one for the spooky people, and I think I'm pretty spooky, so I think that I really identified with it in a way. 8 out of 10. To some, this is the best animated movie of the year. To me, I think it was pretty good, but there are better ones out there, and you'll see later on in this list exactly what I'm talking about. But that is The Wild Robot, the latest film from DreamWorks. My goodness, does this movie look amazing. I love the style of this movie. It has a really good voice cast. I think Lupita Nyong'o as Roz, amazing. She does fantastic. This movie boasts just really amazing animation, and I think if anything, this movie needed to be longer. It has a solid storyline that I think if fleshed out a little bit more could have made this movie truly special. But I think that there was a better movie that was about parenthood that you can watch right now that also came out this year that is in the top 10. So wait and see what that is. I give The Wild Robot a score of an 8 out of 10. I'm not gonna lie, I am overdue an original Planet of the Apes movies marathon, and I'm gonna get to that one day, but I have seen Rise, Dawn, and War for the Planet of the Apes, and I love those movies. So that being said, I was quite excited for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I was not let down. If anything, this is just the type of story that I like a lot. The outcast that makes a name for themselves. That's sort of the reason that I loved Avatar: The Way of Water so much, but I really, really liked Noah as the lead in this movie. I think story-wise, this is the weakest of the new gen Planet of the Apes movies, but I still really liked it. It still looks phenomenal. Like, I can't believe that I am looking at, like, basically full-on animation. Like, it looks great. It's just a really solid movie. I think my biggest issue is that it is just clearly the beginning of the story. I'm gonna have to wait to see how it all plays out, but it was a really good beginning. I give Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes an 8 out of 10. I am going to be brutally honest. I knew nothing about Sonic the Hedgehog until like a month ago, and I still really don't know that much. I watched the first movie, I thought it was pretty good. I watched the second movie right before watching Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and thought, oh wow, this is quite the improvement. And Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I think, takes everything that I liked about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and just does everything better. I really like that these movies are really starting to lean more into the Sonic characters and less the human characters. Granted, I don't think the human characters are bad by any means. I think that for a human cast, I actually really do like them, but oh man, like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, they're great. Shadow is such a dope character. Truth be told, I loved Shadow as a kid, and that has to do with the fact that I watched a Shadow the Hedgehog PS2 playthrough on YouTube, and I was like it permanently altered my brain chemistry. Like, Shadow is just so dope, and he has done so much justice in this movie. But Jim Carrey, man, it cannot be understated just how good he is in this movie, and he's playing two characters. If there were justice in this world, Best Supporting Actor nomination. That's just me. That's just me. I really hope that these Sonic movies continue the trend of just being better than the last one. I'm really excited, especially after those post-credit scenes. I give Sonic the Hedgehog 3 a score of an 8.5 out of 10. I got a bone to pick with some of y'all. Why did you let this movie fail? We're not gonna get a sequel to this one, and that is Transformers 1. This movie was so good. I'm not gonna lie, I was not excited based off of the trailer. Man, this is just a movie with a really good story and really good animation. Sort of the biggest surprise about this movie is the fact that the voice cast is so good. I didn't think that Chris Hemsworth would be a good Optimus Prime. I didn't think Brian Tyree Henry would be a good Megatron. But man, they're so good. It's just a shame that a combination of this movie just being plain animated and being marketed as just a kids movie made this movie fail. I really hope that this is not the last we see of these Transformers animated movies. I thought that this was really good. I give Transformers 1 a score of an 8.5 out of 10. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is up next, and it is just one slot off of being part of the top 10. But man, this movie was good. I haven't seen any of the other Mad Max movies. I watched Fury Road for the first time this year and thought it was great. It's a shame that this movie didn't do well, sort of along the same lines as Transformers 1. Like, I think George Miller is just really good at making a sprawling epic. Anya Taylor-Joy is fantastic as always. I didn't think she had it in her to do this movie, to be honest, but she really just exceeded my expectations. I thought she did great. I thought that the movie visually looked pretty good, albeit it was a step back from Fury Road. I think that there were points where it looked a little wonky, but I thought that this movie was still really good. I really liked the story of this one. I really liked the character arc that Furiosa goes through. I think she's just an excellent main character. The only real flaw I can give this movie is that I think that at points it slows down to a snail's pace a little bit, but I think that it's just a really good long form story. I give Furiosa a score of a 8.5 out of 10. Alright, y'all. It's time. We're finally in the top 10. It was really difficult to rank these movies, but we're here. And we're starting off with Alien Romulus. I loved this movie. I love Fede Alvarez's films. Alien Romulus is just a really good return to form. You can check out my full review and all my thoughts on the review on this channel. But man, this movie just goes so hard. That's the best way I can describe it. Alien Romulus is exactly what I think this franchise needed. It's just, like I said, a really nice back to basics alien movie that pays homage to both the horror aspects and the action aspects. There's a really bizarre CGI character in this movie that I just still cannot get behind, but I think that this movie is just really good. It's a really good horror movie. If you love space horror and you love the alien movies, I think that this is the movie for you. As because of this, I'm going to give Alien Romulus a score of an 8.5 out of 10. My number 9 ranked movie has a review on the channel from Joey. You can check it out in the description, and that is The Bike Riders. I was honestly really surprised. I knew nothing about biker culture and wasn't really interested in watching this movie, but going into it, man, it's really good. I think that this movie boasts just really good character work and really good performances from the cast. There's a lot of actors that come and go in this movie and you don't see a lot of them, but when they're there, they make a really good impact. You have your Boyd Holbrooks and your Norman Reeduses that come and go and really leave impacts. But I think what really makes this movie is the combination of Austin Butler, Tom Hardy, and Jodie Comer. They are fantastically written in this movie. This was one of the biggest surprises of the year for me because, like I said, I was not excited for this movie. I didn't know anything of Jeff Nichols' filmography, but man, if the rest of his movies are as good as this one, I'm really excited to check it out. I give The Bike Riders a score of an 8.5. This next movie is the underrated gem of the year. If there is one movie that you watch from this video, it is going to be this one that I recommend to you. That is Ultram Man Rising. My goodness, what an amazing movie. I was really blown away by this movie. I wasn't expecting much. It's a Netflix original animated movie, which can be hit or miss. I love Ultraman. In fact, the tokusatsu genre from Japan is one that I adore so much. Like, I will watch Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, Ultraman, all that stuff. I love it. And this movie actually kind of ditches some of the traditional tokusatsu aspects. You know, your big fights, your big kaijus, all that stuff kind of takes a back seat, and instead you get a really, really heartfelt story about fatherhood and sort of generational trauma. That's right. Emmy and Ken's relationship in this movie is just so cute and pure. Like, it is just a really well written father child dynamic, and that's fantastic considering that Emmy can't speak. Emmy is a kaiju. Ken is such a good main character. I really related a lot to his struggles and sort of everything that he's going through, and the feeling that you have to please everybody but you don't want to do that. It's just such a complex character, honestly, for a children's movie. It's fantastic. The animation, amazing. The voice work, amazing. The action, great. It's just so good all around. I give this a score of an 8.5 out of 10. I really hope that we get a sequel for this one. I hope that this is not it, but if that's it, I'd be satisfied still. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I'm a sucker for a good romance movie, and that's exactly what We Live in Time is. The whole time, I felt like I was interrupting something between Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh. Like, they have incredible chemistry. But I think other than that obvious aspect of the movie, like, their performances are great. The best thing about this is the plot structure. I am a sucker for stories that are out of order and sort of just pieced together. I think that that is a staple of comic book writing, and I think that that's why I love it so much. But this movie just excels at that aspect. Like, it is just so good. I love seeing the parallels between the beginning of their relationship, the cancer diagnosis from Florence Pugh, the birth of their child, and sort of everything that comes in between. You're seeing little nuggets of their life, and I think that that's such a great way to convey their relationship. I think that it's really good. I give We Live in Time a score of a 9 out of 10. I am so glad that I got to see Anora in theaters. I love Sean Baker's movies. The Flora Project is one of my favorites ever, but Anora is just another W streak for Sean Baker. Mikey Madison is just fantastic in this movie. I think that she definitely should be considered for a Best Actress nom. What I really like about this movie is that it sort of flips on the head the like fairy tale romance of two people that come from very different upbringings and shouldn't be together fall in love. This movie takes that and just, like I said, flips it on its head, and there's really no way for me to explain it to you without spoiling it. I think you should go into this movie blind. It's great. I think it's shot really well. I really like that this story is split into like two halves. Like, you have like your fairy tale romance, and then you have like this really stressful, like uncut gems almost kind of story. Like, it's really dope. Anora is a standout movie this year, and there's a reason that so many people have been talking about it. I give it a 9 out of 10. It's great. Alright guys, we're entering the top 5. Now, I should clarify, every single one of these movies from this point on is a 10 out of 10, and honestly, a lot of it is fluid. Like, I could put one above the other. Like, it's just, all of these movies are great. I highly recommend them. They're all standouts. My number 1, though, is a very solid number 1. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. Luca Guadagnino is one of my favorite directors working right now. I will watch anything that he does, but man, Challengers was so good. It's a masterclass in just very complex character work and sort of the fluidity of sexuality and relationships. It is such a good movie. Zendaya, great. Mike Faist, great. Josh O'Connor, great. When you put them all together, man, this is just such a good movie. Like, I can't gush about it enough. This feels so real, and I think Luca Guadagnino does a really good job of that. His past movies, Suspiria, Bones and All, like, I love those movies. Call Me by Your Name, like, they all excel at just writing very complex emotions and characters that have to live through those. I would highly recommend watching Challengers. This movie gets a score of a 10 out of 10. Coming up next is going to be Dune Part 2. You can check out me and Joey's full thoughts in the review down below. But man, I walked into this movie knowing I was gonna like it. Timothée Chalamet. Amazing Paul Atreides. I don't think I can imagine anyone else as Paul now. I'm really excited to see if Denis continues the Dune series. I know that he's doing Messiah, which is... I love that book, but I would really like to see him explore Children of Dune and then go on to do the future ones. Like, the books are just great. I loved it. It looks amazing. It sounds amazing, I think, is my favorite part of it. I think that this movie is just everything I would want out of a sprawling space epic. I am really proud to give this movie a perfect score of 10 out of 10. The next movie up on this list, coming in at number 3, is going to be one that I think is going to come as a shock to some people, and to others is going to be like, oh yeah, no brainer, yeah. And that is Longlegs, and that really has to do with the fact that I just love this type of horror, that being satanic supernatural horror mixed in with like the gritty true crime type of horror. I love the performances from Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage. Like, they do amazing. This movie's atmospheric, and it actually is one of the few times that I left a movie theater like unsettled, but Longlegs just had a way of doing that to me. The sound design in this movie is just so good, especially at the end once everything just starts to unravel. Like I said, I love supernatural, especially satanic horror, and that is what at its core Longlegs is all about. And man, this movie just rocks. Perfect score of a 10 out of 10 right there. This movie just came out and it somehow skyrocketed to the number 2 spot. What movie is it? It's Nosferatu. Of course. I mean, my last movie that I liked on here was Longlegs. Nosferatu is one of my favorite of like the film bro classic movies, you know? Like, I saw it for the first time in my intro to film class in high school, and it's one that sort of altered my brain chemistry, sort of the same way that Shadow the Hedgehog did. It's not one that I'm gonna like turn on willy-nilly just to watch on a random afternoon, but it's one that I just appreciate so much. The 2024 remake is my favorite kind of remake, where it takes the original and both does its own thing and pays tribute to the original. It's not one that is trying to be the original. The best kind of remakes are just the ones where you introduce a new voice, and I think that that is just what makes this movie work so much. I could gush for hours about how much I love this movie. In fact, I did. The next day at work, I just talked to my coworkers about Nosferatu for like half my shift. It is a quintessential gothic horror movie. I think that this is going onto my favorite movies list of all time. Like, it is that good. I love the way that this movie looks. Its use of shadows and silhouettes and color just makes for a really pretty movie, and one that just does this gothic genre so much justice. The eroticism, the fear of Christ, all of that stuff just makes for such a raw story. The darkness, the bleakness of reality and living. Everyone in this movie is great. Bill Skarsgård, Lily Rose Depp, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Willem Dafoe, Emma Corrin, all amazing. Like, that's just such a great ensemble cast. If there is any justice in this world, this movie gets nominations for at least costume design, makeup and SFX, and cinematography all get a shout. Like, I would give all of the nominations to the production side before I give it to like the actors. Not that that's a bad thing. Man, Nosferatu just rocks. Like, it is such a good movie. So of course I am going to give Nosferatu a score of a perfect 10 out of 10. If you're watching this around the New Year's, it's still in theaters, so check it out after finishing this video. We have one more movie to get through, so let's get to it. Remember what I said when talking about The Wild Robot that this was not the animated movie of the year for me? This movie is. I want to preface this by saying that I don't cry often when I watch movies, but this movie made me bawl. Like, I felt so seen watching this movie, and it's just amazing what was able to be done in a short 58-minute runtime. This movie is an adaptation of Tatsuki Fujimoto's manga of the same name. It is fantastic. The animation looks amazing. The voice acting is amazing. I saw it in Japanese. It's look back. This movie is amazing, especially as a creative, and I'm about to get really mushy, so there is no greater feeling than to share the love of creation with someone else. As a dude that's writing a comic right now and just is sort of going through those motions of falling out of love with it and then falling back in love with it and then meeting people that share that same passion, like, it is just such a good movie. It is one that is beautiful and has some of the best depictions of friendship, love, and sadness that I've ever seen on the screen. There's a moment in the theater where it's silent, like there's no music, there's no sound, there's nothing. You know, during those points you'll hear people sniffling. You know, that was me. I was included there. I would highly recommend watching it on Amazon Prime. I know I said Ultram Man Rising was the one movie that I would recommend, but I mean, this is at the top of the list, so of course it's going to be like the other one that I recommend. This movie's just great, and it is such a well done exploration into the art of creating something. It encapsulates that feeling so well that I can't help but gush about it. Look back, it's a perfect 10 out of 10. It's my number one movie of the year, so yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Don't click off yet, I'm not done. Guys, I'm really excited for 2025. We have so much in store for you next year. In fact, we're already starting our rollout for something. Go on Instagram and check out the Robin Gothica page. Me and Nico have been working really hard on making this just really dope dream project come true. You can check out the teaser for that right here. Man, I'm just so excited to share more from that project. What movie are you most excited for next year? For me personally, Superman is at the top of that list. Check out all of our stuff. This is gonna be a really awesome year. Thank you guys so much. I'll see y'all next year.